Order, and a very warm welcome to this evidence session with the Permanent Secretary and his officials. And you are joined, Sir Peter Schofield, by Catherine Vaughan, Director General of Finance at the Department for Work and Pensions, and Barbara Bennett, Chief Executive and Director General of Jobs and Career Services in the DWP. So very, very nice to see you all. We've got a comprehensive set of questions for you. And I'm going to start. And my particular questions are on the SACE review and the overpayment of carers' allowance. So I was very struck, Peter, when I read the report, and I'm looking at page 9, I think it is, page 10, and it said the DWP has failed to demonstrate the ministerial and senior focus needed to resolve these persistent injustices and reform carers' allowance to allow its core purposes in the modern world. It then went on in Chapter 7 to say the DWP culture and under Chapter 7, which is the DWP culture and previous reviews, it noted that multiple previous reports on carers' allowance include 2 Work and Pensions Committee reports, 2 National Audit reports, and 4 Government Internal Audit Agency reports. It said the DWP has failed to demonstrate the focus needed to resolve persistent injustices on earnings-related overpayments and the implementation of carers' allowance core purposes effectively. How do you explain this?
Well, thank you for inviting us. Good to be here, Chair. On the SACE review, as you say, the Government commissioned Liz SACE to do her review. She published her report with the Government response before Christmas. The Government has accepted 38 of the 40 recommendations, and we're moving forward on implementing those. As you say, there have been previous reports, and there's been previous action. And I do want to reassure the committee that action has been taken on a number of different fronts. In terms of, since 2019, for example, we work with stakeholders to improve our communications. Liz SACE recognises that. That includes our letters reminding customers of the way the earnings limit works. We started to make better use of HMRC data to identify where people have earned over the earnings limit, moving from paper-based alerts. I can't remember if you were in the committee in 2019, but when I was here, then we talked about how we were replacing the RD23 paper alerts with the VEPS alerts, the digital system.
If I can stop you there, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and you run a massive department, so I really appreciate the difficulties that you have. But these are issues that have arisen subsequent to this. There have been a number of reports since then. And I just need to draw your attention as well to the Guardian report on an internal DWP blog that blamed claimants for the overpayments. Again, given what the report had said, that this is a massive failure of culture, let alone competence within the department, how on earth do you explain that? That behaviour is absolutely unacceptable, surely.
Look, as I was saying, we've been making progress. I think the VEPS alerts have made a difference. We're now going through, we've been funded for 100% of those alerts, so we're able to get through those alerts within a matter of days to avoid overpayments. Why didn't that happen before?
Because we were
only funded for 50%, and we were doing 50%. And in that time, we saw overpayments in carers' allowance due to earnings fall quite dramatically. But you're right.
So Peter, can I just say, so if you're saying that the previous government didn't fund you to do 100% of the reviews of the HMRC alerts, did you tell ministers that you were concerned about the implications of that for carers?
We were making a difference. We were getting through those overpayments. But look, we made a mistake, and I was in front of the Public Accounts Committee on the 4th of December. We made a mistake, and we made a mistake particularly around the issues around the guidance for those people who have fluctuating earnings, and the guidance was incorrect in relation to the way, there was quite a technical issue here in the way that we should have averaged not just those cases where there was fluctuating earnings on a regular pattern, but the legislation allowed us to also, if it presented a more accurate picture of the situation of the earnings, to average or to look at averaging where there was an irregular pattern. And the guidance we had, the operational guidance since 2015, did not actually recognise that. So we got that wrong, and we have recognised that. And I am really sorry for the way that we have got that wrong. We're going to put it right. We're building a team to do that. We're going to start inviting people to apply for this in the spring, and we're building a huge team to make a difference on that. We've been funded to do that. We're going to get through that in 2 years. We're going to make a difference. So we are changing. We are making a difference. We got that wrong, and I'm sorry that we got that wrong.
Okay. You rejected, or the department rejected, the recommendation to commission an independent operational audit. Can you explain that? Are you absolutely sure that there are no further issues that would be revealed?
But you can imagine, when I discovered that the operational guidance was wrong, I was quite perturbed at that. So I have already commissioned the Government Internal Audit Agency to do a review of departmental guidance across DWP, which is reporting back to me, so I can see that we can get the accountability right and avoid this happening again. So there are audits already underway. The key thing for me, Chair, is to put right the things that we've got wrong. We've got the funding now to go through all of the digital alerts from HMRC, so we can avoid many of those overpayments building in the first place. We've got the money now to get through those cases where we made a mistake with the operational guidance that was wrong. We're improving our communications, as I say, and this SACE recognises that, and we're making a difference. And we're committed to doing that. I do want to reassure the committee that we've got the funding, we've got the tools, we're going to make a difference, and I'm sorry for the thing that we got wrong on the operational guidance.
And the comment about the blog post?
Well, as I said at the Public Accounts Committee on the 4th of December, our position is as it is. The Secretary of State himself spoke about this. What we say as Permanent Secretary and Secretary of State is sets out where the department is. We are grappling with this. We want to make a difference. We know that carers perform an incredibly valuable role supporting loved ones and friends. Our review that we did in 2021, that we published in 2024, recognised the role that carers play in society, and we want to support them. We want to improve carers' allowance. There are other things we're doing. We've increased the earnings limit to 16 hours of the national living wage. That's £196 a week. That's a massive difference, moving many carers further away from that cliff edge. We're also looking at whether there's anything we can do around the cliff edge, which is such a challenge for many people. But the vast majority of carers weren't affected by the operational mistake that we made. But those that were, we're going to look through those. That's 200,000 cases we need to review. We think that might affect 26,000 people in total, and we're committed to going through that.
Thank you. Steve Darling.
Thank you. Well, DWP is a massive organisation. It feels as if you're almost like a general at a Battle of Waterloo, where you've got so many moving parts going on at the same time. But I'd like to really focus on, carers' allowance and the situation where we are at the moment. And are you confident that this time next year that you will be in a position of stopping debts building up and also have resolved those where debts are sitting with people at the moment? Because it's the personal impact of those individuals who have massive worry about this that I'm concerned about. And what culture are you driving within the organisation to do this, and what key systems are you changing to achieve this?
A number of things are going on, Mr. Darling, and I understand your concern, and I agree with you in terms of the importance of getting this right. So, for example, the fact that we now get the alerts from HMRC when someone has earned over the earnings limit, and we're now funded to process all of those when they come in, means that we can pick those situations where a claimant hasn't told us about an overpayment going above the earnings limit. We can pick those up and look into them, and we are doing that in real time. Already, with the ones that we've done already, we've seen overpayments related to carers' allowance earnings fall from 1.3% from 2.1% in 2020 to 1.3% in the last statistics.
I'm just worried you're in the weeds straight away. What I'm wanting to understand is what strategic management are you, as the top dog, driving on that agenda? How are you driving that culture change? It just feels like it's more of the same of one of the most challenged government departments. What culture change are you driving, and what management systems are you changing to achieve real change for the DWP?
Put someone in charge of all of this, an SRO who's going to own all of this and make sure that we deliver across policy through to delivery. I guess that's the first thing.
But you're not saying what they're doing different to before. What management change are they doing that you're confident that it isn't just going to be the same old and a potential charge of the Light Brigade?
Well, it relates to a number of things. It is partly about having the tools for the job, and we've got a whole series of those. It is partly about how we communicate more effectively, and it's that too. It's also about making sure that our values of DWP, the values that we care, we deliver, we adapt, we work together, we value everybody, these are embedded in everything that we do, and we talk about that. This is a key part of what we're doing. So it's tools, it's values, and it's management focus.
You give me a lot of blancmange that I'm finding difficult to nail to the ceiling. What clear evidence of their management change is there? And I'm concerned you're not able to give me any.
Well, I am. I've given you two things. I've given you tools, and you said talk about the overall, and then I've given you the overall, and you've said give me the tools. So I talk about both. But we've got a great track record of putting right when we do things wrong. So the state pensions underpayment exercise, which I was in front of this committee about 3 or 4 years ago, we finished that exercise. We worked through 870,000 claims. We paid out significant amounts of benefit to those who are entitled to it. Right. So we've done the same on other fronts as well. This is a department that when we know we've got to get things right, we put it right. And I just want to reassure you, Mr. Darling, that we are absolutely determined to put this right.
Good.
And we're putting the resources in place, we're putting the management focus in place. The values of DWP are all about putting this right, and we're determined to do it.
Thank you. And talking about those values, 87,000 people have a liability under carers allowance. You chose, or the Minister chose, that they're only going to write off 26,000 of those. What values came into play around that decision on what is going to happen to the around 60,000 people who are left out in the cold? What were the key principles arriving at that figure?
Well, we're obviously balancing two things here. We're balancing delivering the service, and we're balancing what we need to do for the taxpayer at the same time. The way we deliver that is where we've got it wrong, which we clearly have with the operational guidance on fluctuating earnings for those with an irregular pattern. We're going to put that right, and we put all the resources into that.
Let me finish. Values and principles. I'm trying to understand.
I know. Well, let me finish the argument. What I'm saying, where we do need to collect overpayments from people, the values come into how we do that. And I regularly sit with our debt folk listening into calls, because what we do is when we've overpaid someone, then we talk to them about what the repayment schedule can be. If they say they can't afford a repayment schedule, we adapt it to something that they can pay. We care about how we collect the debt from vulnerable people. We put into place payment schedules that are deliverable for the individual, so we get the balance right. So it's partly about making sure that where we get things wrong, we put them right, and we put them right as soon as we can. Where someone has overpaid us and it was unfortunately their fault rather than ours, then we have to collect the debt, because that's the requirement for the taxpayer, and you'd expect me to do that. Parliament would expect me to do that, but we do that in a caring way, so we make sure the repayment schedule is manageable and deliverable for the individual.
So how was the 26,000 figure arrived at?
Okay, so Liz Sace's review identified that there was incorrect guidance that we know goes back to as far as 2015. And it relates, as I say, to this technical issue about how you treat fluctuating earnings where someone has an irregular pattern in their earnings. And the guidance should have said that the decision maker is allowed to look at averaging out if the decision maker believes that that's a more accurate description of their earnings. So we worked out that we had made a mistake, and we then took a sample of just under 1,000 cases, and we worked through those with the new guidance. The new guidance was put in place on the 3rd of September. And we looked into those, and in those we identified how many would have been a different outcome if we'd applied the correct guidance. And that came out with a proportion that when you extrapolate out gets you to 26,000.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. John Milne.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning. There's been, with committee, we've had some correspondence with the PHSO over this, expressing serious concerns it has with the department about DWP's delay in implementing the action plan following the state pension age investigation, and the overall lack of communication of DWP with the Ombudsman. This is very concerning, since the whole point of the investigation was partly to correct previous failures of communication. So how do you explain this clear, very strong dissatisfaction on the part of the PHSO?
Yeah, the PHSO copied me in on the letter. I was surprised to see it, to be honest. Let me talk to you about the work that we've been doing with PHSO, and in particular on the action plan and the seriousness with which we're taking it. So obviously back on the 17th of December 2024, the then Secretary of State made her decision on the WASPI case. Included in that was a commitment to work with the Ombudsman on an action plan. So as soon as we could get together, I met with the interim Ombudsman, the predecessor, Paula Sussex's predecessor, on the 16th of January 2025. So as soon as we could get together, we worked out how we were going to work together in developing the action plan. It took a while to mobilise, I think, on their side as much as ours, but we then had 2 workshops in April and in June, and we agreed what we were going to do as a result of those action plans. One was on complaints and one was on communications. In the light of that, we then developed an action plan within the department, working across all the relevant teams to develop a plan based on what came out of the workshops that were done with the Ombudsman. That was then completed with a working draft at the end of the summer, which we then had to impact across the department because we had to make sure it was deliverable. Lots of teams would have been affected. And we had a working draft at the point when the Secretary of State on the 11th of November then made his statement to the House saying he was going to retake the decision on WASPI. Now, I mean, this is a serious government exercise, this retaking of the decision. It does mean that we can't work on the implementation of the previous decision, and the action plan was part of that. I met with the Ombudsman before Christmas, and I explained where we were with the action plan. She said she wanted to know that we'd been making progress, so I showed her the draft action plan. To be honest, I thought that she was reassured. I thought if she was not reassured, she'd have let me know, but she wrote you a letter instead. While the work on the action plan is where I've described it, I mean, the other thing I really want to get across to the committee is the work that we're actually doing in terms of action on the front of making sure that we've got our communications right. So, you know, already we've got a whole series of campaigns underway. We've got a campaign underway at the moment called Check Your State Pension Age. We're going to evaluate that in April. That builds on previous campaigns, one about Get to Know Your State Pension and one called Will the retirement you get be the retirement you want? We've got online tools such as Check Your State Pension Age and Check Your State Pension Forecast. That enables anyone to go on to the system and see about what their national insurance contribution records look like. It enables them to see what their forecast would be, what their state pension age would be. We've got the pension. Well, let me finish. Well, I mean, the point is, there is a whole series of things. There's so much. Mr. Milne, there is so much that we're doing on this front. We've got the pension dashboard programme, which I'm sure you'll talk about in due course.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. It's a big department. There's lots of things going on, but with this specific action plan, it's been more than a year since it was first announced. So it is a very long time. And what is it exactly? Why was it needed to be paused at all as a result of the legal action brought by WASPI? Why would it affect the plan at all?
There's a formal, serious exercise going on here, Mr. Milne, which is retaking a really important decision by government. And the decision that was being retaken, the action plan itself, flows from a previous decision that's now being retaken. So there's a formal government process here underway. That means I've got to stop work on the implementation of the previous decision. That's the formal position that we're under.
Do you believe that it would lead to a different action plan from the one you would have had otherwise?
I obviously can't comment on the Secretary of State's decision. I'm sure the decision will come before too long. So let's see. But the Ombudsman knows where we got to with the action plan. She saw it in draft. It was based on a series of interactions that we had with her people. And also, we all, as I say, we are taking action to make sure that people are aware of their state pension age and their state pension situation, with the long list of measures that I described to you earlier, Mr. Milne.
Okay, and then lastly, so do you have a prospective date when we might actually see the finished plan?
Let's wait and see what the decision is from the Secretary of State. Because the action plan with a capital A and a capital P, was something that flowed from a previous decision that's being retaken. There's a formal position here that I'm just trying to get across to you. But I also want to reassure you that there is a working draft of the action plan that was developed before the Secretary of State made his decision, and there is action underway in the here and now with a long list of things that I talked about before.
Well, we do hope that the Ombudsman can give us more favourable accounts of proceedings in the future, but thank you.
Thank you. Joy Morrissey.
Thank you. DWP previously estimated that up to 210,000 people may have been underpaid their state pension due to errors in recording of the Home Responsibilities Protection, with underpayments of £104 million to 12,379 people. And I'd also like to know what the age and gender of those 1,200 plus people is as well. I'd like to know that in the answer. And why, when so many cases remain unresolved, did you decide to close the HRP LEAP exercise and give up on the efforts to reach these people?
I want to reassure you we've not given up on the efforts. It's just that the number of people coming through was much lower than we'd anticipated being, and therefore holding those staff ready, waiting for cases that didn't come in, given the other pressures that we have underway, didn't make an operational sense. But the door is still open. Let me tell you what we've been doing. So what this relates to, the HRP issue relates to people who were receiving child benefit, who were not being given an HRP on their national insurance record. And this relates to a period, we think that this was all happening in the period before the year 2000, so these are quite old cases. We identified a problem because it came up in the survey that we did for our annual fraud and error work. So we identified the problem. We identified the scale of the problem through the sampling exercise that we did, and that gave you the numbers that you described before that we'd made provision for in a previous set of accounts, and we built a team ready to go. The process, though, involves two government departments, because the national insurance record is held by the HMRC. If there's a change to the national insurance record, they then pass it on to that, and then we can adjust the state pension as a result. So HMRC it was joint work, we had joint teams working together, but HMRC wrote to the 370,000 people that we thought might be affected, or the population within which we thought there would be people who were affected. They also had an online system, they had 500,000 hits to their system. In the end, very, very few people then translated that into making a claim. And we did some research to try and understand why that might be, because we were quite perturbed for the reasons you described, that people weren't coming forward to get the money that they were entitled to. That suggested that, unfortunately, some people didn't believe the letter. So HMRC did a load of work to reassure people about the letter. They had put things on their website to say, if you get a letter like this is not a scam, but people didn't necessarily believe it. Some people said, well, look, I'm perfectly happy with the income I've got. Maybe some people were worried that if they got more state pension, it would affect their pension credit entitlement and therefore their access to other benefits as a result. And there was other people just said, well, this is such a long time ago, I don't really want to come forward to claim the money that I'm entitled to. We continue to work on this, and the system is ready to go. When people do claim, if people come forward, then the people are there to deal with the claim. So we're doing everything we can, and I want to reassure the committee that the LEAP exercise, in terms of standing a large number of people ready to go, has ended, but the access to this system is absolutely there and will continue to be so.
Here, may I follow up?
Please, Karen.
Just a couple questions. So what is the age demographic spread of this sort of the child benefit error that was happening with HMRC? And how far along will it just be women? Well, is it just women one, and then what's the age spread? So did this error continue for 10 years, or did it continue for 5 years? And is it only HMRC that is giving the communication information? And is it that it affected their pension? Is it that it affected their national insurance contribution top-up and that it wasn't paid? Is that what happened, that HMRC didn't bring that over? Because historically, that's an issue for women. Historically, women who've been carers, having their pension topped up has been something that many, many governments have tried to fix. So I'm just wondering where the heart of the problem was. How long did it persist, so we know how long it's going to affect people? And was it primarily women that were affected, or did it affect others that had?
Yeah, it was women who were affected, and it was the period between 1990 and 2000, we think. That's what our sample would suggest. We think it relates to the way that in that period we were uploading national insurance numbers into the system when people claimed child benefit. How does it affect people? Well, it all depends on the rest of their national insurance contributions record. So they need a certain number of years in order to get a full pension. It may be that the years that they miss their HRP don't matter. I think for many people it doesn't matter, because in any case they already had a full pension. It's for those people on the margins who didn't. Exactly.
So they would be on the margins, because I would imagine, I haven't looked at the data, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it would make me think that if they're already receiving child benefit, they're probably carers, women who sometimes would historically struggle with topping up their pension, all of their national insurance contributions anyways. And I'm wondering if they've even received this information from HMRC, because they might listen to DWP, but I don't know if you see something from HMRC, it usually makes you want to hide, not want to, I don't know if you've taken on any of those communication responsibilities too, or is it just HMRC?
Well, we are referring to it in our uprating letters so that people can know about that from us too. But yeah, the lead is HMRC. To be fair to them, I know you frown, but to be fair to them, they're doing a lot of work to try and reach this community, and they did write to all of them. They wrote 370,000 letters, and they had 500,000 hits on the website, which suggests that the awareness was there. It's also working with other advocates. So Martin Lewis, I think, has done quite a lot of work with us on this to try and raise awareness.
That's good.
I think it's a hard one. Well, Catherine wants to come in. You probably have more details, Catherine.
Well, one of the things I wanted to make the committee aware of is that every year in our annual report and accounts we provide an update on the amount of potential underpayment that we think still arises. Mm-hmm. So at the year end last year, we were estimating that it was £30 million and an estimate of about 3,000 people affected. That is because over time we've managed to narrow down the number of people and also make payments. So although we did talk about the £134 million, a significant proportion of that has been paid out. So our latest estimates are approximately 3,000 people and about £30 million. But as Peter said, we haven't closed off the opportunity for people to keep making us aware and continue that correction. So we will provide an update with the latest figures when we publish this year's annual report and accounts as well.
Yeah, but that's the provision that we're expecting we might have to pay out in the future. I mean, to be fair, the total of 12,379 payments were made as of 31st of March. So you're right, it's much, much lower than we thought it would be. But I think that people haven't come forward because of the reasons that we've described. But there's a lot of work. I just want to reassure you, the door is open, so people can absolutely apply. And if you've got constituent cases which are affected, then please encourage them to put in an application, and our people are ready to go.
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Barron.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to pick up on pension credit, but before I do, I just want to go back just to follow up on John's point in relation to why the department has put on hold its action plan as far as the Bosby women are concerned, because I don't see that at all making any sense. You know, the government's taking a decision or a reconsideration in terms of what the Ombudsman said with regard to compensation, is my understanding. So how we got there, how the women were let down, that's still relevant, and the action plan is still relevant. I fail to see why it stopped due to that reconsideration, because we know how we got there, and the lessons need to be learned, and that's what the Ombudsman's pointed out. So I don't see why we've stopped, and I don't see any reason for that whatsoever, because all we're going to do, regardless of what the reconsideration is implement the same action plan.
Yeah, and I would reassure you that the type of actions that were in the draft action plan are actions that we've got underway. I gave a very long list. I think I bored Mr. Milne with my list of things that we're doing. But these are all actions that we are taking absolutely to get to the heart of the problem about how do we make sure that people are aware of their pension situation. And the online tools are available, the campaigns are there. The pension dashboard, I think, is going to make a massive difference to enabling people to see not just their state pension, but all their potential other pots available. The department is working really hard to make a difference. I'm just making a distinction between action and the action plan committed by Liz Kendall on the 17th of December 2024 related to a decision that is being retaken. That decision is now being retaken by the Secretary of State. I imagine it won't be too long before he makes his decision. But action by the department, and I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Barron, I really do. Action, I just want to assure you, action from the department is action underway in the here and now. We are acting. And there's all these different things, and I can talk you through the different online tools available or the campaigns that we're doing, just to reassure you, if you'd like, about the work that we're doing.
No, I think we've heard that. I'm just curious why the action plan has stopped. Anyway, I'll move on. The pension credit now has the highest rate of fraud and error, with overpayments of 10.3%. We know from our pensioner poverty inquiry that the pension credit application is very long and detailed. And given all the information you collect, why are you not better at preventing cases of fraud and error arising in pension credit?
Well, thank you for the question. As you say, we've been working to encourage more people to apply for pension credit. Now only around 10% of people who apply using the paper form. The paper form has been superseded for most people by telephony or by an online channel. And that online channel, the problem with the paper form, and I know it's been referred to a number of times with 200 questions and all the rest of it, but a lot of those are because you have to put in questions to relate to certain circumstances that might not otherwise apply. So if you've got a child in your claim, then you have to fill in a certain number of questions. If you've got a disability, you have to fill in a certain number of questions. If you've got a second child, that has another set of questions. With the online channel or the telephony channel, we just take you to the questions that you need to answer that are relevant to you. That makes the whole process much more streamlined. That does enable us to get through the claims more quickly. We're now at a situation where we are in a good position with very low outstanding heads of work on our pension credit system. But you asked a question about fraud and error in the pension credit system. That relates to the fact that there's complication in the eligibility. So the biggest areas of fraud and error in pension credit relate to capital and also abroad fraud, so people who are claiming who are abroad for longer than they're allowed to be under the eligibility of the benefit. So we're tackling those. There are a number of measures that we've got underway. Obviously, a key thing is encouraging people to let us know when there's a situation that means that they shouldn't be entitled to, and reminding people of their obligations to let us know. But we're also using access to data. So some of the things that we're doing to drive down fraud and error in universal credit are also relevant to pension credit. We're working hard on capital fraud in universal credit. Some of those access to online open banking systems, enabling people to share their bank account details with us if they want to, or the new measure that came through, the new Act of Parliament that was passed before Christmas, enabling us to get data support from the banks, will enable us to get into capital fraud. We're also able to work in terms of other types of fraud around earnings, using the same channel that we use on carers allowance to get access from HMRC data, and also the eligibility verification measure in the Act will also allow us to pick up on transactions that are made abroad. That picks up on abroad fraud as well. So there's a lot of work that we're doing, building on the work we've done on universal credit. And I just reassure you that the work we've done to drive out, where we focused on fraud and error really hard, and we started with universal credit because it was the biggest area of loss, we've seen big improvements. We can now turn our attention to pension credit as well. We're also doing a targeted case review, so I add that to the list on pension credit.
Okay.
Thank you. And now moving on to Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming to speak to us today. I just wanted to go into some detail on fraud and error, if I may. So the DWP accounts have been qualified for 37 years. So that means we haven't had an unqualified set of accounts since the 80s. So that's a considerable amount of time. And your target to reduce overpayments to pre-pandemic rates will not remove that qualification, and we'll still see billions of pounds in loss to fraud and error. What's our ambition? It doesn't feel as ambitious as it could be. And, you know, I look at the numbers in front of me, and if you look at universal credit, I realise there are far more claimants nowadays because of changes. But, you know, in 2019-20, we had 1.7 billion. Now we've got over 6 billion worth of, that's just on universal credit. So what's the ambition? How do we get back to an unqualified set of accounts? And what's the long-term vision to try and address this?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a big focus for us in the department, as you all have gathered. So coming out of the pandemic, we set out a tackling fraud and error plan to really drive down fraud and error, and a number of measures that we took. And what you saw with the statistics that were published in May is that fraud and error in universal credit has gone down from a height of, and I like to use percentages because it picks up on the point that you made about the sheer number of additional people claiming universal credit. That number pre-pandemic was 9.4%. It rose at its peak to 14.7% in 2021-22. The numbers that we saw in May that we published for 24-25 were 9.7. So it's almost down to the pre-pandemic level. But since then, we've also had the budget, new measures announced. We've had the active that I was talking to Mr. Barron about. That gives us new tools. And the OBR, as part of their forecast in the autumn, produced their assessment of where all of our measures would get us going forward. And that showed us going down with fraud and error in universal credit going down to 7.5% in 2028-29. That's well below the pre-pandemic level. And indeed, if you apply that across the whole benefit system, then that would take fraud and error in the entire benefit system to 2.8%, which on a comparable basis is lower than it's ever been before. Now that's what I'm aiming for. That's my target. And I talked to the Public Accounts Committee about that on the 4th of December. That is exactly where we want to get to. On the qualification, you're right, 37 years. I mean, there's a very technical thing here. It's not a qualification in the normal private sector accounts basis of true and fair. You can believe the numbers. It's just that on a regularity basis, it's saying that too much of the money is being spent in the way that Parliament didn't intend. But I met with the Controller and Auditor General and the Public Accounts Committee Chair a couple of weeks ago, following the hearing that we had on the 4th of December, because we discussed in the hearing that having this qualification for 37 years, I mean, a qualification is a really serious thing. I should be worrying about having a qualification. But when it's sort of, 37 years, 38 years or whatever, it doesn't have the impact that it should do. So we all want to get to a position where that qualification can be lifted, so it can be held over me, so I can be worrying about it. And I think the committee chair for the Public Accounts Committee and the Controller and Auditor General want to see us get to that point that we've got in the forecast. So where I'm heading for, 2.8% by 28-29 is where the Controller and Auditor General and I think the PAC want us to get to as well. That is the target, that's the aim.
So I suppose that's the element is in terms of performance, as obviously this could be utilised as a performance measure for the department. There are other steps in place to actually control the issues that we've got around fraud and error. So is there a need for us to be able to distinguish between malicious and careless overpayments? So those people that are deliberately overclaiming or not telling the information, and the accidental overclaims. What do you think that balance should look like?
Well, we do have that in the statistics. So we distinguish between fraud and claimant error. And those are two different numbers. Out of the 3.3%, I think it was 2.2% was fraud. Some of the rest was claimant error. And some of the rest was error by the department. So those are the three categories of fraud and error in the system. And we measure those in the way that I've described, and those are published in the numbers. I mean, Catherine can probably do a bit more on the numbers or the definition.
Well, in our fraud and error report, in the annual report and accounts, we do set out, hopefully as clearly as possible, the different definitions of fraud and error, because there are a number of different components. One of the things that I was just going to talk about in relation to controls and the qualification that you raised was that we have been working really closely with the National Audit Office on our overall controls framework, making sure that we've got the balance right between controls that prevent fraud and error, but also a system that is responsive to customer needs, that operationally works, and we need to make sure that we've got the balance right between fraud and error prevention and operational efficiency and support for our customers. So we're also talking to the National Audit Office about how to balance those things and make sure that we've got the right value for money in our overall control framework.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Damien Egan.
Thank you, Chair. Staying on the theme of fraud and error, we note that in the last financial year, your target for savings was 1.7 billion, but the department delivered more than that, 2 billion. So I guess the question is, for the next year, will those targets be more stretching?
They will be, because part of that is the targeted case review, which delivered around 500 million of savings, I think, in the year you talked about, and will be rapidly increasing over the year ahead, because we have mobilised. We've now got a full team working on that, and they're working at full pelt to deliver the savings that we've got. So there will be. The target that we set, so we moved away from an annual AMI target, savings target, for this year to focus on getting fraud and error down to the pre-pandemic level in the way that I described to Ms. Hack. So that is the objective, because it's a better measure to look at if you look at savings, that's savings from a high base. What we're going to do is get the base. That's at the heart of all of this. But we do also measure the effectiveness of all of our interventions, and they add up to the last year 2 billion of savings. They'll deliver more than that, I'm sure, this year because of the build-up of targeted case review.
Thank you. You started to answer some of my next question, which was focused around the targeted case reviews. So the savings was 581 million. Obviously, the aim is to save a lot more than that. Do you want to tell us more? You talked about ramping up that work. Can you tell us more about that and the confidence that you've got that you can achieve that savings target of 13.6 billion over the next 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've been funded by the Treasury to deliver because of the effectiveness, because it makes such a difference. So we've had DEL funding, so funding for our running costs, of around 300 million this year, and that continues at around the same level and then building in 28-29. So that helps us to fund around 4,000 agents working away on the work. So it's a huge endeavour. Now we are planning to save over 1.4 billion this year coming out of the targeted case review, and that rises to over 2 billion the year after, and then in a few years' time will be over 3 billion a year. So this is huge amounts of savings coming in. That dwarfs the scale of the targets that we were talking about in previous years. But this is a huge part of what we're doing to try and make a difference. That is around detecting fraud before it comes into the system. Alongside that, we've other measures to try and prevent fraud coming in the first place, which is obviously a much better way of addressing things. And we've got things like reminding people to let us know about changes of circumstance, through to other measures to encourage people in particular life events, such as at a point when someone has a family member they've got children over the age of 16, to remind us to let us know whether they're still in full-time education and still entitled to the child element and that sort of thing. So there's a load of measures we're doing on prevention, but the big detection one is the targeted case review, and it's delivering those savings at that scale.
It might be worth just talking a little bit more about the management information we use to understand where the targeted case review is achieving what we are intending. So we think about the productivity, so the number of cases that individuals are able to look through per day. We look at the hit rate, so how often do they find errors in the cases, and then we look at the amount of AME savings as a result of any overpayment. Now, we will also detect underpayments at times, and we'll want to put that right as well. But that management information is critical as to us then making judgments about how much to continue to invest. And again, we will make the latest information available in our annual report and accounts, as we did last year, on the productivity of those interventions. And it's because of that we have the funding to extend the targeted case review process longer and to expand it into pension credit, which Peter talked about earlier.
Yeah, I don't know, does the committee have access to the National Audit Office report on fraud and error in the benefit system that was published? Yeah. Because there's a great table in there. It really just builds on Catherine's point. It's on page 36 if you've got it with you. But it gives all the... the tax got it. But it's got the management information. It shows some of the measures that we use to check on the effectiveness of targeted case review. Picks up on our ability to focus our efforts where they need to be focused more intensely and where things are going more effectively. I mean, they're under Barbara's control, of course.
It's just worthwhile noting the human element of this as well. So first of all, anybody who works on the front line, be them in the service centre or job centre or any of our teams, they're really passionate about making sure that every penny that we have gets into the right pockets. You will have, those of you who've sat in with our frontline staff will see that. I think the other thing, coming back to the point about as a department listening and learning, there is a lot that we have taken from the insight that the universal can of case review has given us, so that it actually does feed into some of those prevent measures. So for example, we do know and we see that there's a particular kind of challenge for those people who are self-employed, for example. So actually, as a result, we've deliberately put together a task force to support people who are working with us, who are self-employed, because actually it shows that if we set them up well for the first 3-4 months, that they are claiming with us. So targeted case review is not just about finding it, it's been really good at supporting us on that whole kind of informing the prevent. We've got a button on the universal credit system now where an individual can write and say, okay, I've just something's not quite right about this case, for example. And obviously we're doing whole case review as well, so it's not just looking for particular things, actually, that once they're going in, they're looking across the whole case. So it's really great to be able to kind of go into that system of continuous improvement.
Thank you. And if I just continue on the learning from the department, because I was surprised that the hit rate that you talk about where fraud is detected was, our reports say 20%, which seemed high. So clearly it's a really important area for the department to be focused on, but obviously conversely 80% of the cases then that get reviewed, fraud isn't being found. So I wanted to ask about the learning about, because some of the feedback that we've had as a committee is around the kind of the burden, which is to an extent understandable, but learning to make that process for the person being reviewed as simple as possible.
Yeah, and we do that. So obviously, understandably, we'd want to be able to ask for information about bank account details, etc., to do the verification. And I think that work has led to some of the work that Peter's referenced about that kind of verification, the periodic redeclaration that we're asking people to do. It's definitely come as a result. Look, we want this to be a process that works for both people. We not only kind of find overpayments, but they're also looking for underpayments as well. So it's an opportunity for us to make sure that we get that claim right as early as we possibly can. And obviously what we try and do is kind of feed that learning into our training as well. And also as we're ramping teams up, we need to make sure that we're recruiting the right people as well.
Yeah, when I've sat alongside the teams doing this some time ago in Essex, and it was interesting. They're determined to get this right. There's they were celebrating where they'd found cases where there'd been underpayments, and they could get more money to people who were entitled to it who hadn't claimed it. And they also talked really about what do they do when a case comes in front of their desk where someone's got complex needs, how to make sure that they're treating that customer with the support that they need and the opportunity to do various calls to reassure the customer and even to send a visiting officer to their home if they need to. So there's a lot of care that goes into this. It goes back to the values that I was talking to Mr. Darling about at the beginning.
Thank you. Well, to move us on to universal credit, the advances model, so where people can get their universal credit before the 5-week wait. Now, it's been assessed the impact on protected characteristics, but because of the data, there's only one protected characteristic, age, which is reported, and of the 4 outcomes that were assessed, you've identified issues with 2 of them. Just want to ask about your thoughts on the fairness of that model.
Yeah, so as you say, this is people who are claiming an advance before they've been through the full kind of universal credit process. So we often haven't had, there's an optional declaration kind of form about their characteristics, but they won't necessarily have filled those in, and indeed fraudsters probably won't have filled them in or won't have filled them in correctly, which is why the only data we've really got enough data to go on at that stage in the process is age, because you need that to make an application, and location as well. We need to have 70% of claimants declaring on any characteristic for that to be relevant. So what you've seen in that effectiveness review that we published is that what we compare is the proportion who are referred by the model to the proportion who end up being found to have a fraudulent claim. And in those 2 cases, the model over represented people who are in the older age group. Sadly, that includes people in their 50s and people who've been from abroad. So that is how that flags that up. The key thing to bear in mind, though, is that is just one stage of gathering evidence. All of that evidence goes alongside other sources of evidence to a decision maker. The decision maker will also have referred to them cases which are not flagged up by the model, just to pick up on anything else that's going on. And the decision maker will then make a decision based on the evidence that they've got. So this is not a kind of automatic, this goes from here to here, and we've made a mistake. This is just drawing on data that we've got. What we've discovered is that the model is 3 times more effective at identifying the right people than a random model, which is why the conclusion of our effectiveness review is that it is worth carrying on with. It's a small scale to overall fraud and error detection and prevention. You'll have seen in the numbers in the NA report, it's sort of £4 or £5 million in the time that we've been running that. And that compares with a total, and I think in the annual report and accounts we've got this marvellous table on page 99, which sets out the totality of fraud and error prevention and detection activities, which we measured at £25 billion of fraud and error avoided last year. So the machine learning doing 4 or 5 million over the 2 or 3 years that it's been running is a very small part of an overall system. But it's an important one. People worry about the way that machine learning works, which is why we're trying to be transparent. We've started publishing our effectiveness review. The Public Accounts Committee were interested in this, so we brought them in for a private hearing, because there's some aspects of the model that we wouldn't want the fraudsters to know about. But it's worth doing, as I say, because it's 3 times more effective than not doing it at all.
That's a really important stat to draw on, and understand the department is developing and testing for more machine learning models. You've said about it, people will have that concern in their minds about fairness, and so can you tell us more about the learning? I appreciate you can't talk about the mechanics of the model, but how you can ensure that there's fairness and can give reassurance to people.
I think the reassurance is that we'll continue to do these fairness models, these fairness reviews, and we'll publish them. So that gives people the reassurance. The main thing I want to get across is the point I made before, that this is not a kind of automatic robotic system where something comes in and money gets stopped. This is just helping us to gather evidence, helping to target the work of our agents, our case managers and our fraud investigators onto the cases that are more likely to be fraudulent. It helps us to use our resources to target more fraud as a result and increase that hit rate number that we were talking about
I'm
before.
correct in saying that there's no intention to change, that it's always humans that will make the decision.
It's always humans that make the decisions. In our fraud and error work, we don't stop any benefits without a human looking at this, reviewing all the evidence from all sorts of different sources that they've got, and including understanding markers of vulnerability and complex needs as well, and then making a decision off the back of that.
And perhaps just to add that we know that transparency and how we use machine learning is incredibly important, and we have published in accordance with the DCIT Algorithmic Transparency Register all the details of the algorithms that we use. The fairness assessment for UC advances goes beyond that, and we are committed to making sure that we are transparent about where that is used, but as Peter said, always a human taking the final decisions in relation to fraud and error.
Just one point from me. One of the things that happens in targeted case reviews when an agent is reviewing them, they don't know why the case has come to them. Yeah. So actually, hopefully that's a reassurance that on the human element, that bias isn't there. So actually, they genuinely don't know when they're looking at it. So it forces that whole case review, but there isn't that instance of bias there, which for me is quite reassuring from a human perspective.
Thank you. I've got one more question, Chair. So we understand the department is working with the Home Office to access data about people leaving and entering the country. I know that when I went to my local job centre, that was something that they were saying that they really needed. But HMRC recently experienced difficulties in relation to child benefit and the payments as a result of the poor data on entry and exit. So I'd like to ask, how will similar errors be avoided in your work with HMRC? The Home Office, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before. This is one source of data that comes in. A human needs to look at that. And what we don't do is automatically suspend a case based on kind of one source of data that comes in. And I think what went wrong with HMRC is that they were suspending payment while pending doing the investigation. Whereas what we would do is we would review the evidence that's come in before making any decision along those lines.
That is reassuring. Thank you very much. We're going to take a short break now. Order. Next part of this oral evidence session with Peter Schofield, Permanent Secretary to the Department for Work and Pensions, on the Department's annual report and accounts. And I'm going to hand over to John Milne.
Thank you, Chair. So last year, claimants received 4.9 billion less than they were eligible for. Now, 1.2 billion of that was due to official error, and 3.7 due to unfulfilled eligibility, or in other words, they didn't claim as much as they were legally entitled to. So now the media is always way more interested in the fraud and error rather than the unfulfilled aspect. But you touched on this a little bit before, but what are you doing to reduce underpayments and make sure that people do get everything they're entitled to?
Yeah, well, thank you for raising it. You're right that there's a lot of focus on the overpayments and not enough on the underpayments. I want to assure you that I care as much about the underpayments as I do tackling the overpayments. There are a number of elements to that. I mean, at the end of the day, we often, for most of our benefits, we do rely on the claimant letting us know about a change of circumstance. And so one of the key things we're doing, and increasingly trying to do more of, is to remind people to let us know and make it easier for people to let us know. So we're running a new campaign around, it's called Tell Us Too. So it's, when something's changing your circumstance, you might tell a friend about it, but what can you also tell DWP? There's some rather cringy adverts that might be coming up in the not too distant future, but they've got a serious point, which is, please let us know about a change of circumstance and we can make a difference. And that is about adjusting up and adjusting down, of course, as well. We then also are trying to make it easier for people to let us know about a change of circumstance with online systems, so developing something like a customer account where you can bring together in one place all of the different benefits that you have from DWP. You can see it in one place, and the idea is you'll get to a point where you can make a change of circumstance on that system, and that will then be replicated across all the DWP benefits that you might be receiving. So there's a load of work we're doing on that. We're working with our operational stakeholder engagement forum, that's with external advocacy bodies and other stakeholder groups, to help us always improve our communications. But the biggest area of unfulfilled eligibility, which I'm sure you focused on when you studied the numbers, is around disability benefits, particularly PIP. And there's a number of things we're doing on that front as well. I mean, first of all, these relate to a situation where someone is on PIP, but sadly their health condition is deteriorated, so they would be entitled to a higher premium within PIP. That's the sort of situation we're talking about. So how do we encourage people to come forward and let us know about a worsening in their health condition? So one of the things we do is we prioritise those requests when they come in to make sure that they get access to a health assessment quickly, so we can put that right quickly. So they're towards the top of the queue in those health assessments in that process for PIP alongside new claims. But the other key thing that we've often talked about is how do we facilitate that for people who have more severe conditions? So we actually have our visiting service that go out to people's homes, and I think something like 28,000 cases last year. We had a visiting officer that went out to someone's home to help them make a claim for a change in their PIP award. So actually helping people in person. And then this leads to...
Were you selecting them in some fashion, or was it a random test, or were you...
These are people who've got a severe condition.
Right.
That means that is the best way to help them. And we send visiting officers out to help people fill in their PIP claims. I think I've talked to the committee before about a really amazing morning I had in South London some years ago when I visited someone's home with a visiting officer, and we sat round. This poor woman was bedridden with carers 3 times a day. We sat round her bed, me and the visiting officer, and we basically filled in her PIP application form for her to enable her to get on the benefit and get the money she was entitled to. But we do that for people who are also already on the benefit, but where there's been a worsening in condition where they need that support.
Are you finding people aren't proactively making the claim out of ignorance or out of fear that they might be reviewed in the wrong direction, or what are you finding?
Well, that's such a good point, and there's a lot in that. And I've been sat with customers in the past who've lost their PIP, who have been very upset because they've gone forward with for a reassessment, and they've lost their PIP rather than getting what they thought they would get a higher award. In fact, the person I remember talking to in the end appealed and got the higher award in the end. But people do worry about the system. And so that is at the heart of the other point I was going to make on this point, which is about trust. Trust in DWP, because we want to be an organisation where people feel when they come forward they will be fairly treated. And a lot of it is about fear that they've got their PIP at the moment. Yes, they might be entitled to more PIP, but the one thing they can't risk is losing the PIP that they've got. So how do we do that? And we are, obviously we've got Stephen Timms doing his review on PIP at the moment anyway. But one of the things we've been doing as part of our health transformation programme is experimenting with something called case management. I can't remember if I talked about this at this committee before, but case management involves, at the moment, when you under this system, when you phone up to claim PIP, you'll be put forward to someone who says, right, I'm Peter, I'm from DWP, I'm here to help you with your PIP process, I'm here to help you understand what PIP is about, here to help you understand what evidence you need to submit. When the decision is made, they help them to understand why the decision was made so they can understand it, because people often get this letter through the post saying, I don't understand why I've had this decision. So it can be talked through and they can then feel they can trust the decision that's been made. And we think in the trials that we've done suggest that that leads to better outcomes because fewer people, it saves money because fewer people at the end of the day make appeals because they understand the decision in the first place. But we're hoping it also creates more trust that people, when they need to come forward because of a worsening in their health condition, they believe they're going to be treated fairly. So that's something we've been rolling out at a short level, but we plan to get to a point where 20% of claims in a couple of years' time will be handled in that way. And that's building up towards rolling out a full change to the whole way we do PIP, subject to Stephen Timms' review, but by 2029 at the end of the health transformation programme. So building that up. And we're also doing a load of work in terms of DWP's reputation as well, in terms of understanding trust and what we can do about that. So whole series of measures underway to help us tackle this point about unfulfilled ineligibility, particularly in disability.
We need a different name for it.
I know, exactly. It's not a good word. Not a good word.
Thank you, and I very much agree that trust overall of DWP is one of the really big issues, but that's wider than just this particular area.
Agreed. Yeah. We should actually talk at some point to you about the work we've been doing on reputation, actually, because it's important that it's something that we care about hugely in terms of how we come across to our customers and the wider population.
And then, lastly, what assurance can you give us that, or can you offer that removing unfulfilled eligibility from the auditor's qualified regularity opinion won't lead to complacency about the claimants receiving less? In other words, that park it in a different box and you don't notice the figure and you don't have to explain it.
Well, you've noticed the figure. No, it's a technical thing about what's regularity and what isn't. So it matters for the qualification, what's in and what's out. But in terms of how we treat it, there's big section. We've committed to continue to report in detail in the annual report and account so that you can see, you can hold us to account. It matters as much, as I said, as the overpayments, getting underpayments and unfulfilled ineligibility down. And these are some of the measures we're doing. But I imagine as we put it in the annual report and account each year, you'll hold us to account each year for progress on it.
Thank you. I'm joking about names, but in a way it's important because the way we name things affects the way people look at it. Fraud and error overall, people hear the word fraud and not the error. And the fact that it's the department is the cause of a lot of it, but they just hear that one big fat number and attribute the whole lot to fraud.
And in fact, there's much more disclosure in the annual report and accounts now that we have actually worked with the CNAG to split this out. So before, it wasn't as clear exactly how much unfulfilled eligibility there was in the overall statistics. So I think this is a strong argument in favour of being really clear and expanding the information that we provide rather than lessening it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. Just turn now to the more broader remit of the department. Clearly you're the highest spending department, you've got the second highest number of headcount. In terms of being set up to deliver the various things you you need to deliver, including the new skills brief that you're under. I just wonder, on page 140 of your annual report and accounts, you say we are continuing to invest in our talented staff in junior grades through leadership schemes and apprenticeships. But then you go on to say that you've slashed apprenticeships from 5,000 to 3,500 within the department. So you're promoting skills, but you've cut your own apprenticeships by 1,500, a third essentially, within the department. Also, I've been passed information to suggest that the number of skilled visas that you're sponsoring foreign nationals has increased significantly. So I just wondered what you're doing as a department to be set up for delivering the priorities of the British people, including the additional priorities of skills and jobs.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think the machinery of government change that we saw in September was an important change for the department. And obviously I was here with the Secretary of State back in November, and he was talking about the ambition for the department around work and opportunity, and that's exactly what we're set up to do. And Barbara can say a bit more about how we're integrating the skills agenda at a local level. Across the department, though, it's important to do two things with the movement of skills coming across. One of them is to make sure that there's no loss of the kind of connectivity across the whole skills system, some of which sits in DFE as well. So we've got a joint minister with Jackie Smith doing that, and a team supporting her with a director from both DFE and DWP. We've had the skills white paper published in October, which demonstrated how we were working together with education and indeed with DSET across those three departments to make a difference into reform the skills system. And the key thing for us is making sure that the skills system, apprenticeships and adult skills, is directing people into those roles in the economy where we need them most, filling vacancies, supporting growth businesses, and helping people to move on in their lives and achieve their potential. And the opportunity to connect across with our own employer engagement work, with the work of Skills England, and working with Skills England to improve their remit, so it's focusing in on filling gaps. These are all important elements.
Do you understand there's a bit of a contradiction there between delivering those priorities and then the department still heavily sponsoring the skilled worker visas for, say, executive officer level positions in the department? If you're, as a department, going abroad to get people to fill vacancies, but then as a department you're also delivering to ensure that the country is filling vacancies internally, there's that tension? Do you not see the contradiction there?
Well, we recruited 11,000 people last year. We're bringing people in from all walks of life into DWP, and we're a great example of social mobility in terms of some of the people that we're bringing in from different backgrounds, giving them opportunities. Our demographics are very strongly pro supporting a diverse workforce. You'll have seen some of that in the annual report and accounts. On apprenticeships, there was an issue in terms of the civil service operational delivery apprenticeship scheme, where we've got a temporary reduction while we review that scheme and improve it. That's about improving things, developing something that works for our people that we support and bring in.
We envisage the apprenticeships to increase to beyond what they were before. So there were 5,000 the year before. So you see that number increasing back up to that level and beyond.
It's about a range. So I'm going to be slightly vague, because there'll be a range of different types of skills and training that we need. But investing in training and support, absolutely, growing on investing in training and support, because, and this goes back to the heart of the organisation we are, slightly moving around a bit, but thinking about how DWP is changing over the period going forward as we make more use of digital technology. So the responsibilities of our frontline people will change as well. So having digital skills really matters. Having people who are able to work across a range of benefits, so they're able to meet the needs of customers rather than being in a position where customers are moved from one agent to another as we treat with different parts of the claim. So we are absolutely reskilling and upskilling our people. That is a key part of our people strategy, which we're developing. We should, I'm sure, put more about that in the next year's annual report and accounts. Apprenticeships will be part of it. I'm just not going to be drawn on the precise numbers of apprenticeships as opposed to other forms of learning and development. But our people survey scores on learning and development are pretty much as high as they are across anywhere else in the civil service. So.
I wonder if I could perhaps bring in another route by which we bring talent into the organisation and develop people. So we host the Government Security Academy on behalf of the whole of government, and that's been a brilliant opportunity for us to bring in non-cyber experts and people from a whole range of backgrounds, including some of our own frontline operational colleagues, and train them with cyber skills, because we believe that they have the aptitude to do that, rather than relying on expensive, high-end technical skills, which are incredibly important for the department as well. But the Security Academy has been incredibly successful in bringing new capability into the department and on behalf of the whole of government. And I think that for us, there's a range of different ways, as well as apprenticeships, in which we'll want to develop the specialist skills that we need as an organisation.
Before I hand over to a colleague who's got some more questions on this, when we're talking about ensuring we've got the right skills in the department, and I get, on page 140, you commit to ensuring you've got the right talent, training and so forth. Historically, there has been a propensity across both the private and public sector to take the kind of easy route by hiring foreign nationals to fill vacancies, rather than investing in education, training and skills internally. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, look, our focus is on bringing people, particularly from local communities, into our job centres to work in our frontline roles, and in terms of bringing in a diverse range of people locally. It would only be in very, very specific circumstances that we'd need to bring someone in from abroad. Our workforce is very, very focused on people from within the UK, and people who have, as I say, a diverse range of backgrounds. And I think our story on social mobility within DWP is a very strong one.
Thank you. Rishna Ali. Good morning. You've got obviously the adult skills funding strategy, and a substantial part of that is being devolved to mayoral strategic authorities. Can you tell us more about how that's working, and how you will equip job centres to be active local partners to deliver better outcomes? Who wants to start?
Yeah, I mean, Barbara, do you want to talk a bit about how we're working? I mean, I'll say a little bit about how the machinery of government change has happened, but Barbara can talk a bit about the really interesting things in terms of how we're working locally through job centres in this way. So obviously the announcement was made in September. We set up a team to bring people across on a kind of lift and shift basis, to make sure that there was no loss of continuity for training providers and others who received money from DFE in the past. They'd still receive it in the same way going forward, and bringing people over into important roles. But at the same time, we've also given Skills England a new remit. So there's been there's continuity where we needed it, but also the opportunity for significant change. And we've had £1 billion announced in terms of sector skills strategies, as well as work locally in terms of local skills improvement plans. And it's probably in the local skills improvement plans, Barbara, isn't it, that we do quite a lot of work locally with local areas in particular.
Before you come in, can you, when you're responding to that, can you just explain to us how outcomes are driven from the centre working with the devolved and local skills centres?
So, I mean, we're already doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, many of you will have sat in your job centres. You will have seen that we've already got national careers advisors within our job centres. Our work coaches are already geared up, and obviously we have a very strong local partnership arrangement with all of our either mayoral combined authorities, local authorities. So this is not new. So we're excited actually about the input of skills. I think at its core, what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got the right people in the right place, and I think there's quite a lot around the skills machinery of government that really talks to place and those local skills improvement plans. So every person, every leader in an area of a job centre has an objective to be absolutely part of the local skills improvement plan in their area. They can't do their job unless they do, because it is such an integrated works. So we have
so not only is it something that we train when people become kind of team leaders and managers within the job centre, but also there is a push and a pull. So we work not only with the local authorities to make sure we've got the right skills, we work the skills improvement plans, and then we work with local organisations as well.
So in outcomes terms, what do you expect to see, in terms of these changes in relation to overall outcomes and the number of people who are able to get the right support in order to get into work? What are the kind of national objectives and changes do you expect to see in terms of more positive outcomes?
Yeah, so we're staying with local skills improvement plans to begin with, and then helicoptering out, if you like.
Yeah.
So the way that works is that Skills England provide guidance to local areas, and they are about to publish new guidance for the next 3 years in terms of what needs to be done. It's then led locally by the business community, but bringing people together from across the different sources of support. That will include FE colleges, that will include the job centre network and the local council and other providers of support in that area. And that is all about finding the right solution in that area. So for us, this is about making sure that skills gaps are filled, but how that is tailored in different areas, subject to the overall guidance from Skills England, will vary obviously according to the local labour market. But it's one part of an overall set of approaches where we have a lot of devolution of funding alongside national programmes that then work together in a local area to meet the needs of local economic geographies. And for us, the way that we measure outcomes is around seeing those outcomes translate into vacancies filled and people into work in different areas, and comparing where we were before with where we are going forward.
Can I just come in? I think the other thing that we are really positive about is the fact that actually it's this link between supply and demand. So it's not just about the right people with the right skills, but actually it's the jobs as well, right? And so actually that's one of the things that we've been doing. So we've been working with trade bodies as a result of these conversations. So we had the skills for care that we're working with in adult social care. We are working with energy and utility skills, specifically in specific areas, to make sure that actually there's that supply and demand. The other thing that's really positive, especially in terms of the skills moving across and Skills England, is the fact that they are already managing really good, strong relationships nationally and locally with key employers. And so we're bringing together our strategic relationship teams and theirs, and actually really making sure that we've got one consistent conversation so that we haven't got several people talking to the same employers.
Can I just on that, what are you doing in areas where you're seeing less positive results in terms of spreading good practice? Are you coordinating better connections between and with employers?
Especially from the job centre perspective, we absolutely buddy up with job centres that have either got similar challenges, have got similar skills gaps, and what are the lessons learnt. We've just done that very specifically. For example, in Birmingham, we've got many people at work, but lots of digital skills. What's the upskilling? What have they managed to do? How we've managed to get access, working with local FE colleges, etc. If you go to Waltham Forest, you'll see that not only is there a youth hub in Waltham Forest, but there is also an NHS have got their own. It's fantastic. You should go and see it. It's a room where actually people can get kind of medical training, nursing training. That's exactly what we want to be seeing more of. And so, me taking someone from another part where we've got real skills gap and getting them to see Waltham Forest, our network and the way that I manage our teams absolutely plays to that supply and demand match.
I mean, it would be helpful to get some hard data on what you expect to see in terms of trends. I know you've got dashboards and so on to look at that, collecting local data and what that looks like nationally, so that we can see the impacts of the changes, the reforms that are being made. And also to come to careers, services and contracts. Obviously, that's another change in terms of machinery of government. Can you, obviously there are some concerns about the current advisors and bringing them in-house, and also concerns have been raised about smaller contractors. I am concerned that we don't lose the expertise and innovation, and that bringing it in-house doesn't mean a loss of the expertise. What's your assessment of how that's going and what you're going to do to make sure that that you're keeping, maintaining the expertise and the good work while making the positive changes seem positive.
No, exactly. Well, Barbara said a bit more about how it's working out. I mean, I would just emphasise the point you just made. There are two things we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
We've got, I've sat with a number of careers advisors over the years, and they are excellent. They often sit with us in job centres already. But what we want to do is integrate that service much more clearly into the way that we help people on that journey from coming into the DWP in the first place and getting into work and progressing in work beyond. So we're trying to, on the one hand, be able to make sure that people feel confident about coming across and knowing that their skills will absolutely be valued in DWP on the one hand, but also doing this in a way that enables us to integrate the service. So we don't want this to be through a contract. We want people to be part of DWP so we can work in a really joined up collaborative way.
How confident are you that you can make those changes within, over the next 9 months?
Well, Barbara's having these conversations, so yeah.
So it's very much a merger, right? Very deliberately a merger. Yes. Okay. I just want to be really clear. There are lessons and best practice from both sides. So we've been really impressed with how the careers advisors, how we professionalise that service, and we've already started to integrate some of that learning into how we're delivering the coaching academy, for example, for the Jobs and Careers Service. I've deliberately put a senior leader in to oversight this. As you quite rightly say, these are contracts. We have got 5 prime providers, and so we are doing everything that we can to plan through meticulously, so we'll have a plan in the spring around that, but also as well as protecting the relationship that the primes have with their subcontractors. We're trying to do everything that we can, so we've written to URSA to ask for some help so that they can work with those organisations really quite tactically, but also just things like we've created a video so that actually the primes can disseminate that down to the frontline teams to give that reassurance. We're making sure that we go through things line by line, and also making sure that we take all of the learning that we have. So that careers advisors are in places that we currently aren't at the moment. So I think there's an element of humbleness around bringing that in. So there's a very practical, sensible plan that will be developed and will be in the spring, but there is also the people side of things, acknowledging the fact that understandably people are nervous. We deliberately brought in because, well, from a commercial perspective, you can't always guarantee that the same primes will be successful if you were to recontract, and that they would use then the same voluntary organisations and SMEs. Yep. So there is that risk, but also we really want to integrate the service. Coming back to your point earlier, this is an end-to-end journey that we want to take people, and so I don't want to keep referring people. I'll take you to that person, there you go to that employer. So actually, as part of the Jobs and Career Service, we're totally integrating skills, not as an optional thing, but it's part of the upfront conversation that you have with someone. Back to the point that we've talked about, right people in the right place with the right skills.
Just one final point, which is in relation to organisations that are contracted that have deep expertise, whether in relation to disabilities or youth unemployment and so on. What are you going to do to make sure that the relationships and expertise that's there isn't lost? I mean, we saw, 10, 15 years ago, career services were dismantled and then having to rebuild. It's really important to avoid making similar mistakes of the past.
We are aware of the need to make sure that this service has the access to the best people at the right place at the right time. Individuals even are delivering, those organisations are already delivering through local authorities. Some of those organisations are local authorities, so and part of the whole, it's about making sure that we make
systematically are you getting employers connected into job centres and working with careers services so that they can act as, alongside your coaches and careers advisors, act as employer mentors?
Very briefly, if you wouldn't.
Yeah, we've got employee advisors. They're an integral part of the whole
from
job centre.
the world of work as opposed to recruited to do.
No, and their whole job is to bring in those organisations to make sure that they're filling the jobs in the locations. Don't forget, most of our work coaches, our employer advisors, they live in the communities they serve. They want to be able to see people.
Sorry, I meant people who are in work.
In work. No, and we are
engaged because we've seen good examples, but one of the organisations in my own constituency got closed down. They were doing good work. So,
yeah. I mean, the point I was going to make, just sort of building on the sentiment behind your question, is that we do need to make sure that, particularly into the education system, young people are seeing, the world of work and are thinking about work as a pathway going forward, and apprenticeships as part of that, alongside other pathways that are available to them. One brilliant way is have mentors from the business sector coming into schools and colleges. And we see that all the time. But I think, we can do more with our employment advisors who have that access to the business community locally anyway.
So we've just dialed up our work experience.
Going to have to leave it there. I'm ever so sorry, otherwise we're not going to get through the questions that a lot of our colleagues have to ask. Steve Darling.
Thank you. And I first wanted to alert colleagues, because I know a couple are interested in 12 as well. I'm not going to touch the supplementary. I'm going to go on a different angle, so colleagues are aware of that. I also wanted to put on record that I've visited Job Centre Plus in Torquay on a couple of occasions since becoming a Member of Parliament, and I've been blown away by the compassion and caring that the staff has demonstrated to me, and clearly they must engage with the community across Torbay. So I just really wanted to get back to you on that. But it's job coaches, and that was one of the groups that I engaged with when I went and visited. In June you announced that there'd be half the time on the initial meetings with people they're engaging with for job coaches. What's the rationale behind that, and what other changes are there for job coaches that will drive that positive change that we all want to see?
Yeah, shall I pick up on that to begin with, Mr. Dye, because we discussed this at the Public Accounts Committee as well. The point I want to reassure you is that where we do shorten from 50 minutes to 30 minutes that initial claimant commitment, and I've sat with work coaches who've been in that situation, and they've come to the end of the 30 minutes and they've said, well, I need a bit longer. We can normally find a way of accommodating more time where necessary. But at the heart of this was really trying to make sure that we were focusing the work. Our work coaches are amazing people, as you say, and thank you for saying what you said about the team in your constituency. We need to make sure that we are focusing their work on things that are going to add the most value. So we've done reviews on the things that they do at the moment. The traditional way of working is that you have a group of claimants in what's called the intensive work search group, and we take them through a kind of like the same process for everyone. So for the first 13 weeks, we meet them on a weekly basis, and then beyond that, it might be fortnightly, and then potentially referring people to a separate provision. What we want to do is be able to focus our work in a more tailored way, so that the people who really, don't need the interaction with a work coach, but potentially in due course could be able to have an interaction with a digital tool that prompts them, could have that interaction, freeing up our work coaches for the people who most need it. But in this, so that's the long term, but the sort of short term, in order to free up resource to be able to focus on people on the health journey in Universal Credit who previously didn't have any contact at all with work coaches, we've focused within the intensive work search group. We're doing less of some of the things which are less valuable. So that extra 20 minutes on the claimant commitment we felt was less valuable than the first 30 minutes. And then on two other fronts, the claimants who've got earnings, we're going to see them less frequently because the studies show that doesn't make a big difference. And also beyond the first 13 weeks, some claimants we were seeing on a weekly basis still will now largely see them on a fortnightly basis. So those were changes that were made, but it's really about using our work coach in particular. The new thing we're doing is spending time with people with health conditions who previously didn't have any work coach support at all.
Thank you. Then my supplementary is around trauma-informed. And Sir Peter, what trauma-informed training have you undertaken? And I understand that work coach colleagues undertake trauma-informed approach. what outcome is the so what question? What would you expect? So what did you learn from it? Assuming that you hopefully have undertaken trauma-informed training, and what would a work coach actually be able to do differently, or what skills would you expect them to have from that trauma-informed training?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I particularly picked up was around creating an environment in which people feel comfortable, and so we've got a number of job centres where we're taking a new approach to the kind of layout and support, trying to make sure there are areas there where skilled work coaches can take people who need it to a different environment and different types of support, where they can feel more comfortable about that. And how do you engage in that way, and having that at the heart of what we're doing as part of the service. But that then does play out in terms of the training, the different ways that we support people with different situations. Would you want to?
Yeah. So it's about being able to have the right conversation with the person that's in front of you. I mean, we work coaches, as you have observed, and thanks for your feedback. Actually, I think our work coaches, it's a lot. It takes a lot. It's a difficult role. You never know who's going to be in front of you, and so things like trauma-informed approach, the renewal that we've done on the customer additional needs framework, the update of the 6-point plan, the work that we do with our independent case examiner to constantly keep on learning. There's a lot that we've been talking about today about tone and culture, and I think this trauma-informed approach, having our teams put through it, and making sure that people actually kind of have the right ear, that they're listening to people when they come in and they can pick it up. We deliberately do things like Ask for Annie, where we make sure that if somebody comes in and they're a victim of domestic abuse, they're able to be supported. So it's just about that ear that we need to make sure that our work coaches have. They do come in, customers have such vulnerabilities that we need to support them with, and so it's about tone, it's about listening, it's about constantly improving, it's about making sure that we are bringing in the right people into the organisation all the way through the employee life cycle, from who we bring in, how we train, how we retain, how we continuously improve. And so you quite rightly bring out trauma-informed approach, but that's just one of a suite of support that we give to our work coaches, as well as time as well. If they've had a difficult conversation they've had to have with somebody, actually how do we give them time out, all the way through to those things. So we've got to be able to constantly evolve and improve to be able to support those customers and the needs that we see in front of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. As we speak, you are in dispute with the largest trade union representing the workforce in the DWP. The PCS union is balloting its members over strike action over the 25-26 pay offer. I was a trade union official for 25 years before I entered this place, and I spent all of that time in negotiations. If you end up in an industrial dispute, it's a failure of the negotiating process. I'll come on to how we got here and what you're going to do about it in a second, but if that strike action goes ahead, how will you avoid disruptions to the services that your department provides for millions of vulnerable people across this country?
Yeah, no, like you, I really don't want us to get into this situation, and I don't, and you know, I value our relationship with our trades unions hugely. I think they play an important role flagging up issues that maybe wouldn't come up through the line, and being very supportive to colleagues all across the department, and many members of DWP are members of trades unions. I mean, in the case where we have disruption for whatever form, but particularly disruption because of industrial action, we have methods of working around that. We put in place contingency arrangements. It will obviously depend on the nature of the action that's taken as to what those arrangements are, but we have those response teams that are ready to go, and we have ways of escalating whatever needs to be done in the way that we need to. We have those contingency plans in place, but it would depend on the situation. But I mean, I regret where we've got to with the PCS. I mean, it relates to pay. We does go back to the situation we have in terms of the pay remit that we've got. Remind the committee that the pay remit we were working through with in the year we're talking about, we had a pay remit of 3.25% with the opportunity to spend an additional 0.5%, particularly focused on colleagues on lower pay or where there were workforce issues. So for our lowest paid workers, we did more than that. For our AOs, there was a 4.1% settlement. For EOs, we did the full amount, 3.75%. So we're restricted with the arithmetic in terms of what we're able to do, given the scale of the number of people in DWP who are in those lower grades, which makes it different from many other government departments.
So let's talk about that, but I would be interested to know if you are putting in place contingency arrangements in the likelihood that this strike takes place, because my understanding is the indicative ballot indicated that 80% of those voted in favour of some form of action. So, I mean, just very quickly, are you putting in place contingency arrangements now?
Well, we have contingency plans already that are well developed for a range of scenarios. That's something that we do because of the risk of disruption for all sorts of reasons. So we have a range of plans that we'd be ready to apply as necessary. But the ballot has only just started. It runs through till the end of February. And I do hope that colleagues feel that this isn't the right response because of the nature of what we've been able to offer. But obviously we'll need to see what comes out of that ballot.
So just in terms of the department having a different composition, if you like, in terms of workforce to other government departments. I mean, the profile is different. 63% of DWP staff are women compared to 56% across the wider civil service. 47% of DWP staff are 50 plus in age compared to 37% across the wider civil service. 76% of DW staff for executive officer grades are below compared to a civil service average of 49%. So you clearly do have a very different workforce profile. So why is it then that you didn't apply to the Treasury for an exceptional case, business case, for additional funding?
Well, because the Treasury are very clear that in a business case has to basically fund itself. So, you have to find a way of funding that through a reduction in the workforce elsewhere. And that we don't have those plans yet to be able to make that sort of case.
Make any representations to the Treasury on this matter, specifically on pay for your workforce, given that the vast majority of them are in lower paid roles?
Well, we have this constant process in the run-up to the remit. I'm not going to go into the details of the conversations that we have, but we do. I would make 2 points. One, restate the point you've just made, Ms. Baxter, about the fact that, unlike within any remit, that 0.5% spread across the low-paid gives less because we have more people in those lower grades than other government departments. But the other thing I would say is you've also got to look at the levels that people are at already. And our pay in those grades compares very favourably already with many other government departments.
Well, that's an interesting point because DWP is falling behind other government departments according to information that I've seen. So in terms of pay awards elsewhere, Department of Education, AOs was up 7.88%, Ministry of Justice was up 5.6% for AAs, 5.7% for AOs in the HMRC was in the HMRC and 4% for AOs and EOs. And by comparison, in 24-25, the DWP decided to increase the pay of the most senior grades by 6%, when the most junior grades got a lower award of between 4 and 5.5%. So why are you favouring higher increases for the higher paid?
Well, first of all, those comparisons are not particularly equivalent. The Department for Education is a very different mix. Second thing I would say is when you say that we're falling behind, actually I think many of the numbers will show, okay, they might be catching up, but we do pay at a favourable level. there were some anomalies elsewhere in the system that meant that for some higher grades, particularly specialist grades, we made a decision that for recruitment reasons or for pay anomaly reasons, we needed to do some targeting. But that is not the case for people at every grade. The senior civil service was lower than that. So, I mean, I could write to you, if you like, with the full kind of story on the pay structure, if that would be helpful, because there's the problem is we can sort of pick on different kind of statistics. I mean, I just want to reassure you, we have, with the money that we had available, we did as much as we possibly could for the lower grades. And that is, the care that we take to all of this. We had some other anomalies we had to address. But as I say, the remit was 3.25 plus 0.5%. For EOs, we did 3.75. For AOs, we did 4.1%. So we've done more for the lower grades. But the arithmetic is difficult when you've got the structure that we're talking about.
I'm conscious of time, so my last point would just be that I would urge you to reopen the negotiations with those trade unions, because industrial action would have a catastrophic effect on claimants. 20% of respondents to a recent survey of the DWP workforce suggested that they were claiming in-work benefits themselves, and 14% were using food banks for extra support just to get by. I think you made the case for additional representations to the Treasury for support, so I would leave it there and welcome anything you can provide in writing.
And the other thing to say is we also have a benefit system that enables people to get access to vouchers for kind of cheaper grocery bills. It's open to everyone with Tesco's and Sainsbury's, with the awards. I can't remember what it's called now, Bright Awards. It's similar to the NHS blue light system as well. So there are other sources of support for people too. But look, I take the feedback from the committee.
Thank you. Lee Barron.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. But to justify low pay on the basis that you can give your workers vouchers, I think you should reflect on that, if I'm honest. If we're happy and content as a government, as a department, that we can give working people vouchers to survive, I think that you should reflect on that quite severely. I really do.
Sorry, vouchers is the wrong word. I'll take that back. Vouchers is the wrong word. It's access to discounts.
I think
so. Discounts from retailers. Anyway, it's something that many employers give. I was just adding that to the point that we made. But I take your point. Look, I want to pay my people as much as I can. I mean, hopefully it's come across in this hearing, the value that I put on particularly my frontline people. They do an amazing job. I have to operate within a framework that I operate within. And within that, I have put all of the money, the 0.5% for those grades, I put it into each of those grades and done more on the lowest grade. Now, I have a different structure from other government departments who can do more, who can take money from other grades because they've got more people in that situation, put it there. And I do hope that our people reflect on the opportunities they have in DWP and feel that they don't need to take industrial action. But I do value the work of our trades unions, and will obviously respond to what we have. But Mr. Barron, it is discounts, not vouchers.
Okay. Lee, do you want to carry on?
I'm just going to leave it in relation to the comment that's been made. There's one way to resolve a dispute, that's round the table talking. Yep. And it's not about planning, it's about sitting around the table talking. So I would turn around and suggest that the department does that and tries to avoid the ballot, tries to avoid the strike and tries to avoid the dispute.
Yep. Thank you. Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm very conscious of time, so I keep my section brief. One of the things that, I've also been to my local job centre, and one of the things I can see on the ground is the engagement between our local job centre and other colleagues, such as my local college. So, as we've had government changes which will require DWP to work more closely with the Department for Education, what have you learned from your experience of working across other government departments? And how will you ensure that the work is effective and focused on outcomes in terms of, more people being able to secure good quality jobs, utilising the skills function that we now have in our toolkit, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it operates at a number of levels. I'll talk about the national, and Barbara might want to talk about the local. So at the national, I think the key thing is making sure that we've got, first of all, the jobs coming into the economy in the first place. So working across with other government departments on the growth agenda, on the industrial strategy. And you'll have seen, as I say, the sector strategies, £1 billion going into those significant sectors that really matter from an industrial strategy point of view. So that means creating training opportunities within those sectors. And building on that, where government is spending significant amounts of money, so for example, investing more in defence, how do we make sure that that money goes through into building capacity within the UK that then creates job opportunities for UK people? So it sort of starts with kind of creating the job opportunities and using the growth agenda and the industrial strategy to help to do that, and to make sure that we're targeting our efforts in a way that supports people into those roles. I sit on various groups with other government departments. I think seeing that coordination is the first point. Then within the skills area, as you say, working closely with the Department for Education, I think you'll see with the skills white paper the fact that is authored by 3 secretaries of state, because 3 departments working together to make sure that the skills system works through education, through further education into higher education and into higher level skills and research, so that that's working in terms of bringing the right levels of skills that people need into the economy. And we need to build from that to make sure we've got the right qualifications and the right levels going out. So you'll have seen some of the things announced in terms of the apprenticeships, with more shorter courses, more courses for young people, rather than the sort of higher level skills that might be funded elsewhere by employers. So these are a range of different things that are going on, all trying to come together around creating the jobs and creating the support for the people individual. But then, do you want to talk about the local
so what happens
situation?
nationally actually plays out locally. So some practical examples. We've got work coaches in the probation offices in Colville and Loughborough and Leicester, right? We've got 4 work coaches in Berwyn, prison, etc. I think we've also got armed forces champions working with the Ministry of Defence. That's very much localised where there is a large MOD footprint, for example. And I think also we work tirelessly with our Department of Health colleagues. So we have, for example, in Wales, we have done a bit of work where we've got work coaches actually sat within GPs' practices. So it actually really is bringing that kind of whole system approach to life individually, especially kind of tailored to the nuances within the area as well. I think it's also worthwhile just pointing out our work with devolved administrations as well. We talk about local authorities, but actually it's really important that we absolutely respect and work very closely with those people in Scottish Government and also in the Welsh Government. So we have deliberate teams that work tirelessly to make sure that the relationships that we do, so it's kind of national, local, but hopefully those examples give you to kind of tease up some of the things that are happening on the ground, especially maybe in your area.
Thank you, Chair.
Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. The National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, another quango I'd not heard of before, rated the Synergy programme as red, which means obviously it's off track. I'm keen to know what you're going to do to bring it back on track, because clearly we need to ensure that public money is being spent as efficiently as possible and that you're delivering frontline services. And by ensuring you've got a more efficient back office, we can do that. So what are you doing to bring it back on track?
Really important. So the Synergy programme, it went red in the autumn of 2024. So I changed the leadership, brought in a different team who've been working tirelessly to turn that round and get that system operating, that programme operating effectively. It is a really complex programme because it brings together 4 government departments, 4 of the largest government departments. Their back office systems around things like finance, procurement, HR, payroll. So it will account for around 290,000, I think about 290,000 colleagues. It's basically, well, maybe not quite that, but it's around about half the civil service. So it's us, MOJ, DEFRA and the Home Office. I mean, that team have done a great job. They've delivered on some of the key milestones around bringing in a technology partner, an integrator partner.
So specifically, what you're doing to bring it back on track, specifically?
Okay, well, so you've avoided me telling you the whole story. I've got to go to the punchline.
I'm conscious of time,
okay,
but I wouldn't want to miss out the answer. Okay,
well, the good news is it is now amber, and it's on track, and moving forward, key milestones are being hit. We made progress in terms of appointing a business process supplier, service provider. So that program is on track. You should keep holding me to account on it because it is really difficult, complex, when you've got 4 government departments working together. The NAO have been doing some work on shared services across government more broadly. We're one of a number of clusters, but we are the biggest cluster and the most complex one as a result. But I'm with you. I mean, we should be onboarding. I think we're DWP, the first department, we're onboarding in 2027. But the key thing, and I mean, Catherine might want to say a bit more about this, in terms of how do we make them, I mean, it goes to the heart of your question. Okay, procure the thing. How do we make sure we make the most of it in terms of driving efficiency and standardisation? There's great work going on in the finance community to do that. I don't know whether we've got time for Catherine to do a couple of minutes on that.
We haven't, so I'm sorry if you haven't.
In my word.
Raise it again next time.
But it's amber. It's a crucial thing.
Joanna Baxter.
I'll be brief. When will the pensions dashboards become available to the public?
There's another one, obviously we've talked about in this committee before because we put it into reset in 2023. Again, brought in a new leadership team and have made good progress. So the latest statistic on that is that they've now connected up something like 60 million records. So that's 75% of the records that need to be connected up. There's a deadline of completing that process by the 31st of October this year. Alongside the 60 million records, we've also connected the state pension records up. So we've got something that has got the vast bulk of the records already there, and I take great confidence in the progress that's being made there. I think I do remember this conversation we had before because I think you were challenging me on alongside that actually user interface. So one of the things that we are also doing alongside the connection, what I often call the plumbing, is making sure that we are testing how the pension dashboard is actually going to be used by members of the public and by the industry. So that work is, it started with kind of industry groups to make sure that the data comes through in a format that can be drawn together. And the plan is that the Money Helper dashboard will be ready to go when we are, 1, confident we've got the plumbing worked, and 2, we understand the kind of user journey, so we can make sure that as people get the information about their pension, they might be kind of channeled, signposted to guidance support in terms of, okay, well, it's all very well, what are you going to do with the information that you've got? So we need to make sure that works. But what we've said we'll do is we'll give a 6-month notice when we are ready for the ahead of the Money Helper dashboard to be ready. So it's at least 6 months away, I suppose, is the way of interpreting my answer. But to give you confidence that the work is going well because we've already connected up so many of the records.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've just got a few questions to ask you. You may want to write to me on this, but in your response to Steve Darling around the cases that you are looking at in terms of overpayment of carers' allowance, the DWP didn't accept that allowable expenses overpayments as identified in the SACE review were relevant for overpayment.
No, it wasn't that. It was more, she was really keen for us to be quite prescriptive about the guidance, that people wanted to know exactly what costs were covered. And the problem as we thought about that is, it's not like HMRC with business expenses where you can be pretty clear what they are. I mean, this covers things like care expenses as well. So we wanted, at the moment, the guidance gives a lot of kind of discretion to decision makers to allow a wide range of different types of expense to be covered. And what we don't want to do is inadvertently cut out the sort of expenses that are already being allowed for in the system. So that's why we didn't think, I mean, what she said that carers, there was a group of carers who wanted real clarity, But actually the risk of clarity is you narrow something rather than keeping it wide. So that's the debate we're having, trying to work through.
Okay, but also the risk of that is that there will be continual overpayment of this on allowable expenses if there is such a diverse view with different assessors.
The thing is, how do you keep that? No, it's a fair challenge. This is not the final answer by any means. Absolutely, we need to reflect on this. But it's how do you keep the breadth while still giving the clarity? I mean, that's fair. But as I say, we'll get to. So, could you write to me on that? Okay.
I think that's key because it was left as a question mark. So, I just want to briefly follow on from this actually in relation to the carers. So, thinking about our safeguarding responsibilities and what has been accepted by the department in terms of there needs to be more of a systems-wide approach, and that includes within all policies. I will be brief. Within all policies, considering the impact around safeguarding. So, how is the impact around safeguarding our carers? I note from the IPRs rather for this year that there were 4 cases of carers who were included for your IPR reviews. So how are you going to ensure that for carers, the impact on their mental health, providing such a key role for all of us, how are you going to make sure that they are safeguarded?
Well, the Secretary of State gave a statement after we were both here in the hearing, I think on the 8th of December, setting out the steps that we're taking on safeguarding with a kind of 5-year step-by-step review. It starts with training, making sure that our people are fully trained. So we have training, objective of training.
It's not mandatory, is it, at the moment, Peter?
It's not mandatory at the moment.
It's up to... have you undertaken it?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Very impressed to hear that. What will you be looking for in terms of the skill set that you expect to be developed that's ultimately going to address the cultural issues that we've been talking about today in the department? So that safeguarding is absolutely central to everything the department does.
Yeah, I mean, safeguarding is all about how do we recognise where there is some risk of harm or neglect or something related to that. And how do we make sure that we know how to recognise that and then what to do about it?
But Peter, it's beyond that, isn't it? It's looking at how will our policies and how we deliver those policies make that safeguarding that vulnerable person even worse, or potentially make a non-vulnerable person vulnerable.
It's the heart of what we've done. And one of the things that the Secretary of State announced on the 8th of December is producing a strategy document, a safeguarding policy framework during the course of this year. So you've heard the intent, you've heard the training, you've heard of the focus. What you're talking about is a system-wide approach so that it is embedded in the culture, and that's what we're developing over the course of the year with something that we can produce. We're committed to producing that by December, and that'll say more. I mean, it's part of a journey, and I mean, you've been with me on the journey, I feel, all the way. And it's not just about safeguarding, it's about complex needs. And the annual report and accounts says more and more about what we're doing. I'm changing the culture bit by bit. This is another step. So the next step you'll see is the safeguarding policy framework by the end of the year. But it's part of a journey that I feel we've been on together over the years.
Well, I'm grateful to you for that and recognise that the changes that have been made. Could you write to me in terms of the skills that you expect to see, particularly from your senior management team, in terms of the safeguarding approach from this? There's another point, if you could also write to me, and that is in relation to PIP. It was following on from a question that John asked. So the DWP previously said it would process 20% of PIP claims online by 2026, 20% by this year. But that's been pushed back to 2029. So could you write to me about the reasons for that and how we can get that more on track?
Well, I mean, the key thing is this is about taking the postal journey out of the process. And the point I want to get across, and I did say this to the Public Accounts Committee on the 4th of December, but it didn't make it...
You haven't said it to us.
No, well, I will say it to you now, in the 15 seconds I've got, is that already virtually anyone, unless they're an appointee, when they phone up to make their PIP claim, can ask to go on the online journey. So they can then immediately benefit on the online journey. That is here in 2026. That applies to about 90% of customers. They have to make the phone call, but after that phone call, they can be on the online journey. They can avoid all the delays with the post. They can go through the form in a methodical way, not having to answer questions that aren't related to them.
Get back to my question. When will you got the change of 20% of PIP claims that you originally said was going to be completed by 2026? That's been pushed back. Why is that?
Well, it's confusing two things. Already it's 90% now with the online journey. What happens by 2029, we get to the point where we are able to move out of the existing contracts and do the whole case management in a completely different way. The 20% relates to the transformation of the whole journey of PIP with case managers in the way I described. We'll get to 20% of those by 2028, but there's a limit to how much we can change of the entire system under the existing contracts. It's limited to 20%, and that is 2029. But in terms of the online journey, 8% can use it now from gov.uk, but 90% can use it once they just make a simple telephone call. They can all go on the online journey. And what we found, where we've had the online journey from end to end from gov.uk through, is it takes 20 days on average out of the processing time, and that would get us down towards the metrics that we've been aiming for in the conversations with the Public Accounts Committee. Sorry, lots of numbers, but I just want to reassure you progress is being made and customers can use this system already.
Okay, we will conclude the session now, and I'm sorry to have overrun.